Hello, 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 my friends. Welcome back to Fertility Confidence Podcast. Today, we are switching gears a little bit. We're going to give out some content for women who are a little bit further in their journey, who are actively or thinking about surrogacy, about egg donation. I had a really beautiful and mind expanding conversation with Leia, who is the founder of Canadian Fertility Consulting, a company which she brought to life after being a surrogate herself many years ago, and is now actively working and helping women advocate in the fertility space with surrogacy, finding a surrogate, becoming a surrogate, and how that process, looks, but also advocating for that process here in Canada. So we were able to just sit down together, and Leia explained so beautifully, why she got into this space herself, and hearing her stories of just how incredibly alone and isolated she felt when she was a surrogate. And it touched me deeply, because we talk so often about how the fertility journey is such a lonely and isolating experience. And then to hear firsthand from the surrogate side of things of how that has felt. And so she has made it her life's mission to make sure that women who are going down this path, both as a surrogate and as an intended parent, actually helping to form those deeper connections, to foster those relationships, to make sure that both parties are very well taken care of. And it's something that we just so drastically need here, especially in Canada. So I hope that you find this conversation insightful, regardless of where you are at in your fertility experience so far. I definitely learned a lot about surrogacy. I even left the conversation going, could I do this? And this is something I have definitely had many thoughts about over the years. Could I do this? And so just listening to Leia and her experience and how she's helped couples, and her just love and passion for making sure that everybody has the opportunity to have the family that they desire, regardless of how they have to get there, is wonderful. So I hope that you enjoy. You can find more about Canadian Fertility Consulting and about Leia at fertilityconsultants.ca. And they're also active over on their Instagram at cfc.families. And I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Hey, Leia, welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. I'm so excited to have you today.
Excellent. Me too. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about surrogacy, egg donation, and how taking this holistic approach to sort of dropping into the maybe unsettling reality of having to utilize the services of a surrogate or a donor can be for people. And so I would love to answer any questions you have, or I can just chat away, whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Why don't we start with you sharing a little bit about you, about your journey, let our listeners get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll dig deeper into what you do in the fertility community.
Absolutely. So I'm a mom of 5. And my first, who has actually rejoined our family, I gave up for adoption when I was 16. And in that, watching her parents become parents in front of me as they were in the delivery room, and I was able to navigate a beautiful adoption where I lived with them and I breastfed, and I, lived on Salt Spring Island, BC. We navigated it so beautifully that I sort of tucked that memory away, and remember a guidance counselor's office wall saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and tuck that away. And after I'd had my first 2 kids, realized I loved that moment I had with Alana's parents, and, started thinking about it and talking about my adoption story. And, a neighbor had said, oh, well, we're really struggling with secondary infertility. We'd like to have a second child. And, would you ever consider being a surrogate? And I ended up being a surrogate, not for them, for some religious reasons and whatever, they didn't move forward. And so I sought out an agency and became a surrogate once, then became a surrogate a second time. And what I now know about those experiences is they were quite isolating. Facebook wasn't a thing, 20 years ago. There wasn't sort of the internet in the same way in community. And so I realized after the second journey that the community piece, the taking care of your surrogate means taking care of your baby, known egg donations, and the community that can create are so beautiful that I went, wow, okay, there's another way to do this. This isn't a customer and using a surrogate, using an egg donor. It is through this beautiful gift that is non-transactional. And so I started CFC and Egg Helpers. And it's interesting in Canada that surrogates and egg donors are unable to be paid. So there's a reimbursement of expenses, and the government, in their well-meaning agenda, did not want the commodification of children or women, which I strongly stand behind. I believe women and children, birth is sacred, and we really want to honor that. And, work is work. Sex work is work. Surrogacy is work. Egg donation is work. And thank you, government. As women, we can make our own decisions. We're good. We are, we can vote. We're not a third world country. And so, we carried on, and I became the first agency and only agency in Canada to be under siege by the Assisted Human Reproduction Act, which sent the RCMP to my office. I was held at gunpoint. My offices were raided. It was crazy.
That's wild.
That was 10 years ago, and I had 3 staff. Fast forward, I have 30 staff. We, have grown our business through that. And I talk about it really openly because for me, it's important that intended parents know that I value their experience so greatly that instead of walking away, when at that point it would have been easy, I could have, started another business, taken another job. I dug in, started Fertility Advisors, and we advocate in Ottawa for the decriminalization of surrogacy and egg donation. Not a commercial system, because our social network in Canada wouldn't hold that, because if I'm paid this year, I don't get child tax benefit next year. I can't get, childcare subsidy. I can't get dental benefit, all the things, right?
Yeah.
And so when we work with the MPs or the senators or, whoever we're lobbying with, or whoever we're lobbying against, we really share that intended parents want the opportunity to purchase their surrogate flowers and not face a fine of 10 years in jail or $500,000.
I did not know that. For flowers?
A gift is a gift. Money is money.
Wow.
If there's not a receipt for an expense.
Wow.
So, through all of that, I was still like grappling with, how do I create community within surrogacy, egg donation, and in infertile community who has been held hostage by shame and insecurity around who am I if I can't?
Right.
And so through, my court case, which obviously ended and was great because I'm still working and, all of those pieces, I started looking at, we know what drugs and alcohol does, how it affects a baby during pregnancy. We don't know is how isolation affects a baby during pregnancy, or a birthing person during pregnancy, or the parents of that birthing person. So how do we connect people? How do we honor their experience? How do we hold space for them where they are? And where they are is different than where someone else is, every time, and when we talk to surrogates and we share with them about, a program I created called Sacred Surrogacy, which is an online community, subscription box, self-care products, malas, mantras, tea, all these ceremonies that are so inherent in pregnancy and have been forever. When we talk about that And when we talk about for intended parents, how they can connect with each other so that they can connect when baby is here is
Right.
such a beautiful gift. And so we work a lot with, we have a counselor who works with intended parents throughout the time. We have a counselor that works with surrogates throughout the time, and really knowing, for surrogates, intended parents, they're used to, or prospective parents, they're used to disappointment. They've been at this often a long time, whether it's adoption that failed, whether it was IVF that was unsuccessful, whether it was IUIs, like whatever it was, right?
Right.
And so for surrogates, if we have them sign up as surrogates to give these people a child, and we know 20% of IVF is just never going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I if I signed up for this? I failed. So
Right.
if we sign up as a surrogate, as a rite of passage, as an honoring of ourselves, of something we can do that is miraculous and beautiful, and we don't need to be a university educated person, and we don't need, any fancy bullshit. We just are here. We have been pregnant. We honor the beauty of pregnancy, and we want to share that with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about us, not them. Great. And sacred surrogacy fills that space in the community. And all that long story to say that our program Sacred works with other agencies. I've been to Mexico City and held women's circles for non-English speakers, and I don't speak Spanish. And through translation, tears are tears.
Yeah.
Honoring is honoring, allowing women, people to let go of their fears around these pregnancies, these fears around the birth, setting intentions for the relationship that they want to build with themselves, with their partners, and then with intended parents. And we have retreats for intended parents as well. And we have, yoga and great food classes and all this fun stuff. And it really has been my way to repair the isolation that I felt in my first two journeys.
Yeah. I'm like having all these flashbacks of clients as you're sharing your story, because I haven't had to walk this journey with many of my clients through my career, but I have with a couple. And I would say isolation is probably the number one feeling and thought and emotion that, beyond all the other things that they're struggling with, that's like the biggest piece, because there's the infertility community, but now you almost feel disconnected from that when you're stepping into the surrogacy journey, and there's not a lot there. And it's not talked about all that much. And I've had parents of clients say the same thing, like, how on earth do I support my child going through this journey when, like, I don't understand, I don't even, there's no one to talk to there. I don't know any other moms who've gone through this with their daughters. And so I can already just see all the amazing good that you're doing in the community and in this space, because the journey is complex, but I love how you're weaving in that connection to that. It's a very big philosophy for us here at Fertility Confidence Method as well, is building that community piece, because regardless of where you're at in your journey, it can be a very lonely road. So would you share with listeners what the journey of coming to this conclusion of surrogacy, what it kind of looks like for the intended parent couple? Like, what are those steps that they're going to be taking through that?
Absolutely. So people come to us in various ways. Sometimes it's a referral from their fertility clinic. They've had, unsuccessful transfers, unacceptable linings, whatever that is.
Yeah.
They've had recurrent losses, but they have to have 5 losses at this clinic before they're considered. I mean, let's just abuse people. And or they have diabetes, and it's not safe for them to carry heart disease, people who have had unexplained infertility, people who have mental health issues in which going off medication isn't okay.
Yeah.
So people come to us and we meet with them and we find out, what is it about surrogacy you're curious about? What scares you is the first question I ask. And it's always that she's going to keep the kid. And we talk to surrogates and they say the same thing, but that the parents aren't going to come, and
Right.
so, we all have these like
You have the same fears. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We talk to intended parents about, what it looks like in Canada, because it is different. In the
Right.
US, you can go to the US, you can pay a surrogate, you can speak to her or not. And that's great for many people. Many people, wake me up in 9 months and hand me a baby. That would be their dream.
Right.
And so our conversations don't always end in a client becoming a client. Sometimes it becomes a referral to a US agency, or, going to Mexico, or, going overseas somewhere. Because everyone has a different threshold of risk. And when I talk about risk, it's never about someone keeping your child. It's about emotional risk.
Right.
Which risk is your heart willing to bear at this point? Because mine only can risk so much, and yours might have capacity to risk more. And so how do we then meet you where you are? And if you are up for a relationship with a surrogate, if you are up for, sort of creating that community with her and being connected, then what does that look like? Does it look like, a midwife home birth, which, 80% of our surrogates want to have a midwife. During COVID, everyone wanted a home birth so that the parents could be there.
Right.
Does it look like obstetrical care, because there's sort of been some things in the past? Does it look like, you could connect and attend appointments and be present? Or does it look like that might be scary right now? And us being able to then go to surrogates in our world, in our community, and say, hey, we got these people, they want to become parents. Here's what they're up for. They would like the choice to terminate the pregnancy should there be an abnormality present. They would like obstetrical care. They would like midwifery care. They'd like a relationship. They'd like a little bit of distance initially because they've had loss after loss at 11 weeks. So come week 12, we are going to, push them to be excited about a pregnancy that maybe they weren't sure they could be excited about.
Right.
Single mom, single dad, gay couple, heterosexual couple, older couple in their late 40s who, did all the things right and went to university and got the degrees and got the jobs and saved the money and then went, all I remember about in sex education is not getting pregnant. No one told me that after 35, my eggs were going to, roll off a cliff, or start to, or the concept that the idea is that, I mean, you and I know that there's a lot of fear mongering in this industry community. And so, we then find a surrogate that fits that criteria, and we find parents that fit her criteria. And we introduce people and they begin to develop what I call the most intimate relationship with a stranger that they will ever have.
Right.
And it is raw and real and hard, and you are in it. And if she has a miscarriage, it's not like your miscarriage, because now you're watching it on someone else's face. And did your face look like that? And what does that bring up for you? And you want to care for this person, but you can't because you got to care for yourself. And, we're asking a lot of people. We are asking a lot of people who have already been traumatized by the medical system, who have already been misled by the medical system, who have already been made promises by fertility clinics 3 years back, and they're still there with that same doctor who keeps telling them just one more try. Hey, doctor, you willing to make that try for free? Because, we're 3 years in now.
Right.
And for surrogates who just get pregnant, I don't think I have a surrogate who planned a pregnancy, it just sort of happens. And when it doesn't happen and intended parents are wanting to support her and she's wanting to support them and everyone's crying and, there's a lot. And then financially, it's a huge ask. In Ontario, there's, the OHIP funding that is touted as, it's free. And then we look at it and it's really a portion of a portion of a portion is covered. And so how does that look? And, so financial investment is one thing. You can all work harder, make more money. But the emotional investment is the one that is so sacred and so deep and so painful. I carried both of my surrogate journeys for intended mothers, and I remember both the greatest joy of watching her face watch her son be born, and the deepest pain in that same second.
Yeah.
Wishing it was her. Grateful her son was here. And I could literally see it, like, she's like collapsing on the floor, literally. And her husband is looking at me, just, mouthing the words, "Thank you." And they ran over to him at the bassinet, and I heard the clock ticking, and it was like a gym clock, those really loud.
Yeah. Those big white ones.
Yeah. And I'm waiting, and I'm like, I am here alone. They have their baby. Who am I? And it was like 10 clicks, and he looked back, and he was like sobbing, and he's like, "Thank you. You did this." And I like, even now I can remember that clock, and I think, knowing that it was 10 seconds, that's okay for me. But knowing for many surrogates literally around the world that birth alone, I know parents who have surrogates in Ukraine who have birthed alone, during the war in a bunker. Like, that's not okay for me. Like, that's not a thing. And so that emotional moment makes everything that a surrogate does worth it. And when I talk to surrogates, every one of them says the same thing. And even during COVID, when you couldn't have the parents in the room and all of these things, and surrogates would say, like, watching them hold their baby, that's it. That's the moment. And for intended parents, the moment is a million moments. Wow, we got an ultrasound. Wow, we're at 6 weeks. I've never been there. 12, what? 20 weeks. Frig, I better start telling people. I haven't told anyone, because I've never gotten here. I don't know how to tell people. How do I tell my job I'm taking a year off and I'm not pregnant? There's still this thing, like, in 20, I can't remember when it was. I always say 2014, but I think it was before that. I did a survey, and we work with intended parents around the world. How many of you pretended you were pregnant? How many intended moms? It was 20%. Wore a fake stomach.
Oh my goodness.
Took time off work at 5 months and said they were pregnant and sick.
Yeah.
That breaks my heart that in today, in my lifetime, that anyone had to do that, because the Greek Orthodox Church would kick them out, because the Catholic Church doesn't agree with IVF, because their family is super conservative, and like, that would just be horrible. Or a gay couple pretends they live together as friends, or, all of these reasons that I've heard over the years. And, if we could create a community that was based on, ceremony and celebration and connection and commitment, and honoring infertility in the same way that we honor, a baby shower, a gender, like, if we could honor it and like sit in circle with our friend who is struggling and hold that space for her, so that when she does have a surrogate, she tells us, because we've created that psychological safety and said, this is the coolest thing, like, let us be there for you. I think we would see a shift with surrogacy for sure.
I think
donation as well. I mean,
yeah. I think just lack of conversation, like lack of conversations like this, is a big reason why it takes some couples even so long to start to open up to the idea. And I can't imagine it's an easy decision. I know for the couples I've worked with that have made that decision, it was by no means something that they just woke up one day and said, we're just going to go this route and we feel really good about it. Like, it comes with so much so much complication and baggage, which is why I love that you work with counselors in your firm, in your consulting firm, because I can't imagine that not being a requirement for both
Absolutely.
parties, right? Intended and surrogacy, and the surrogate as well. Cause that's just something, like you said, because we don't have the same, I mean, I feel like we don't even honor, pregnancy in the way that we used to anymore, but now we're removing that piece even further. And that stigma that comes along with it is so incredibly huge that it breaks my heart to hear people like pretending and hiding and feeling like they can't have those conversations with their people. It's sad.
It really is. And I think
Yeah.
we minimize it to celebrities, you know.
Right. Yeah. It
Who
seems
cares?
unobtainable
Yeah, and
almost,
it's
right?
like, my favorite story is a woman who worked, she was a law clerk, and then she called me, and we talked about surrogacy, and she knew how expensive it was, and she just really didn't have anyone. She just wanted to be a mom, and she called me and she said, I just want to tell you I'm going to be ready in a year. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, I took a second job at Tim Hortons working the night shift. I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. And she did. And she made it happen. And she, she shared her story with everyone she met, and it was interesting because it ended up being her boss who ended up like writing her this very generous check. And so
Oh.
she ended up going forward before, but
Mhm.
her story inspired someone.
Yeah.
And I think, or I know that we take for granted that our stories just are, it's okay. I'm fine. I'll figure it out,
Right.
but sharing our stories inspires the next person to take that leap of faith, to become a surrogate, to become an egg donor, to become an intended parent. My 3 adult children, are egg donor, have donated their eggs. I've donated my eggs. My 20 or nearly 20-year-old just came home yesterday, and she had a tricky egg donation and lots of eggs, and she's feeling like crap, and but her intended mother was in the room for her donation, and
Oh.
her intended mother spent time with her in Toronto, and they were like, I met her because I was there for a work trip, and they were literally the same person. Sarah's in social work, the mom is a social worker. They're
Yeah.
both quirky and, unapologetically kind of weirdos, and and watching that. And I said to Sarah, I'm like, how does it feel? Like, does it feel like, I want to check in with her, right? And she's like, feels like I'm helping someone have a kid,
Mhm.
like
I mean, she
that's
is.
yeah, and I'm like,
Hopefully.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
and and I often, when it was me donating 20 years ago, there was no conversation about egg donation like that. I mean, forget it. And you know, when my kids are donating, I want to check in. Is this something you're doing because your mom did? Like your dad was an engineer, so you went to school for engineering, or is this something you're called to? Um, because for many of our clients that have a surrogate, they also have an egg donor because they are, sort of advanced age, I
Yep.
say it with quotes,
Yep.
um, and have been told that that's their best chances. And,
Mhm.
so, we really foster that relationship and hope that people are willing to have a known donor that they can, have that connection with
Yeah. That's
and have be
beautiful.
a part of the process.
Right. Yeah. Do all clinics, I guess maybe specifically, I'm sure you can talk more to like Toronto based clinics, but do all clinics work with surrogacy, or do you have to go to certain places to go down this journey?
Sure. So Health Canada created a requirement for clinics to be a primary establishment to do surrogacy. So not all clinics are doing surrogacy, and some clinics that aren't doing it well.
Right.
Health Canada also removed the requirement, if you can believe it, for counseling. So counseling of intended
Didn't
parents
we just say that was super
so
important?
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no assessment required anymore for surrogates or intended
Oh,
parents. And
right.
so I only work with clinics who have a couple things. One of them is in-house counseling, that if a surrogate is there and has an ultrasound and there is a loss, egg donor has a bad retrieval and needs to talk to someone, that someone is there
Immediate. Yeah.
at the moment, in the moment, to care for the person. That's like just a non-negotiable for me.
Yep.
And then secondly, that the surrogate or donor has their own nurse who they know they can call, like that they have someone, like not just like the general line.
Right.
And so some clinics do surrogacy really well, some do not, and the same with egg donation.
Right.
And so, Toronto, it seems like there's a clinic on every corner these days, lots popping up. And it's really exciting for me that clinics are looking at a more natural approach. We found this year, last year in 2022, that natural IVF cycles without the use of estrogen were as successful for our surrogates, even by 2% more successful.
Awesome.
And we found that, again, the clinics I want to work with are the ones that are like open to that and open to a surrogate saying, this is my body and this is what I'm up for. And for some surrogates, it doesn't work for what they're up for. And so we have to say, thank you very much. Like, there is a requirement of some medication and ultrasounds and monitoring and these types of things. And clinics are really becoming more understanding that the population of surrogates and egg donors are not infertile, and they need to be handled a little differently.
Right. That's such a good point.
And we really appreciate the doctors that are good with that and get it.
Amazing. Yeah. One question that came from my community was, do you have a good chance to match with someone in and around your area, or are you possibly matching with people out of province?
It really depends. For some people, they want a surrogate really close, and we kind of talk about that. Like, I get really curious. Is it that it would be easier for you to be appointments? Yeah. Okay. So if that's the goal, you have to imagine you may run into this person in the grocery store often.
Right.
And we don't know how that relationship's going to go. My goal is 3 hours. I want someone 3 hours away, because then you have to make plans. And I think especially when you're tucking in as a new mom, having someone around the corner, while it sounds great during a pregnancy, when we're looking beyond that. And for many people, it's hard to look beyond that because they just haven't even gotten it yet. They may want a bit more distance and sort of a bit more privacy as they're parenting and sort of figuring it out. And the 2-year-old screaming, and, now your surrogate's walking up on you at the park and you're like, oh my God, she's going to think I'm the worst mother in the world.
Yeah.
Like all those things. But yeah, we have a lot of surrogates in Ontario. I would say our largest sort of communities, BC or provinces, BC, Alberta, Ontario, and outside of major centers, because major centers are often very expensive to live in.
Right.
Just like the highest infertility rates are often in major centers, stress, pollution, long work days. Surrogates are often stay-at-home moms, and living, in Ontario, if I could name the top 5 cities, if you are looking independently for a surrogate, you want to look in Barrie, you want to look in Trenton, you want to look in Pembroke, like so outside of Ottawa. You want to look in Thunder Bay, and you want to look in Windsor. So those are the 5 top cities. Military places, military cities, military spouses seem to just, really interested in showing up for people in that way.
Yeah.
They're a family who really demonstrates acts of service. That is often their love language, is to do acts of service for people. And surrogacy is like the ultimate in that. So those would be my 5. Whitby, Lindsay also is another spot for sure.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. I'm sure there's people frantically writing those down too. And we can put that in the show notes for everybody. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of this insightful information. I feel like I have a million questions probably that will come flooding through to me, because it's not something that I have had to personally dig deep into for my own journey, but also not something that a lot of my clients have walked down. And I know that this is something always even in the back of people's heads, later in their journey, and they just maybe aren't ready to open that door. And so having a safe place to explore what could this possibly look like is just only going to make it, an easier experience for couples who get to that point. So first and foremost, thank you so much for using
Oh,
your passion and your desire to advocate for couples in such a big and beautiful way, because we definitely need it. And on that note, I would love to know a piece of advice that you would love to leave our listeners, maybe those who are specifically in that kind of transition period of starting to think that surrogacy might be a part of their fertility journey.
absolutely. My biggest advice is get over the white coat syndrome. Your doctor is a businessman. He's not,
I actually said that to a client this morning.
like, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Do you guarantee any level of success? Do you do surrogacy? What is your success rates? How do you treat your surrogates? You know, how do you do it? Like, you need to know that your doctor that you've trusted for all of this time is or isn't going to be able to be the one to support you with your surrogacy journey.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the key. These clinics are money printers. I was going to say money launderers, but that was the wrong word. Money printers. And, for me, I say to intended parents, these clinics, a lot of them are now offering these guaranteed programs.
Yeah.
If you're going through surrogacy, I don't suggest them otherwise. If you're going through surrogacy, I suggest them, because we don't know. And it is a casino and you're paying a lot up front, but you're getting it back if it doesn't work. And there's something there.
Yeah.
So definitely interviewing the doctor. Do they have a counselor on staff? Do they have the infrastructure to support a surrogacy journey?
Mm-hmm.
And what is their philosophy around supporting intended parents, the birthing person, and intimately connecting them
Mm-hmm.
as one grouping?
Yeah.
That's my advice for sure.
Yeah. And I love what you said earlier about understanding that surrogacy is not the same as treating infertility, because it's so incredibly true. They're so used to working with couples who are struggling to get pregnant. And now, yes, you're going through the IVF process, but it's an incredibly different ball game when you're working with someone who doesn't have the diagnoses, doesn't have even that unexplained piece there. And I never would have thought about that advocacy for a more natural, lighter cycle that may actually be better for those women that don't need all of the extra support. And I think that that's something too that would be really, really important to ask the clinics you're working for, because it will potentially make your surrogate's journey a heck of a lot easier as well. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's a really good point for people that are thinking about this to write down and ask about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been great to talk to you.
Amazing. Oh, you too. Yeah. How can people find more information about you, Leah?
Absolutely. On Instagram, we're CFC Families. Our website is fertilityconsultants.ca. We would love to connect with you, even just to answer your questions and, look at next steps. Sometimes just having the conversations with people who get it and understand is just a way of being able to just move that much closer to your goal of parenthood.
Yeah, amazing. I'll make sure that's all in the show notes, and hopefully we'll get to chat again soon.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon.